Hello, folks. It's another edition of Faith, Friends, Flying, and Freedom. I'm your host, Nathan Mackey, and today we have a very special guest. We have one of the chief pilots of American Airlines, Cline, with us. And Lori, I'm so happy to have you today.
Nathan, thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Well, I've known you and your husband George for almost 20 years, and it's a real pleasure to have you on. And we're going to talk about flying and your career as a pilot and an airline captain. And so we're going to start out with your early flying here, and we're going to let's see if we can do this. Let's see. It's going to be a little out of order here, it looks like, but we'll try this. So there's your grandfather. Here we go.
Yeah, that was my grandfather, and I learned to fly on a Cessna that he bought back. That's a picture of him when he took it off the assembly line in 1959, and then we ended up learning to fly together, my dad and I.
Mm-hmm.
And I was flying before I was driving. So that airplane now resides somewhere else in the country, and I think you have got a picture of it later on. I've actually taken another ride in it since
Wow.
we sold it many, many years ago.
Hmm.
But I learned to fly obviously in the 70s before women really had even gone to the airlines. And so when I said I wanted to be an airline pilot, my parents fortunately encouraged me, and they didn't say, oh, no, you can't do that. There aren't any women airline pilots. So I just continued flying, and eventually it opened up, and sure enough, I got there.
Wow. Hmm. That's amazing. Um, and so you learned to fly in a Cessna 172, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great trainer to start on because it's very forgiving. It's really an excellent airplane. A lot of people are beach people, or you could be a Cessna person, but I loved learning on a Cessna.
I almost said you were gonna say you were a beach person, or there are beach
Yeah.
people or mountain people. I was like,
There
wait a
you
minute, wait a
go.
minute.
Yeah. Well, in this case, you're either beach people or you're Cessna people, and I was a Cessna gal,
Mhm.
and I did my flying. And my first job out of college was helicopter pipeline patrol, if you can believe that.
Oh wow.
And from there, I ended up at the company that you're seeing there, Atlantis Airlines,
Hmm.
and I was very young. They hired me. In such a way that every time my number came up to upgrade as captain, I think I got passed over 9 times. And finally they said, have you turned 23 yet? I mean, it wasn't they were passing me because I was female. They were passing me because I had not yet
Hmm.
achieved my 23rd birthday, which you have to have
Hmm.
in order to upgrade to captain. Of course, back in those days, you could take your ATP in advance, which I did, and show up on the FAA's doorstep when they opened on the date of my 23rd birthday when the FAA signed it. And I actually flew that very day. That's a picture of me signing my release, looking over my route on the very first day as captain in what would be, was the youngest airline captain in the world because you couldn't be any younger. It was my
Right.
23rd birthday.
Right. I wonder how many other female captains have done the same thing.
I doubt very many,
Hmm.
honestly. It's
Hmm.
kind of a fluky thing.
Well, there you go. Well, congratulations. That's a big accomplishment. Um, Now, who was your flight instructor? Who trained you?
I had a lot of instructors over the years. Honestly, I couldn't name a whole lot of them. All the ratings that I had. I went to college. I did a 4-year degree with a double major, and I
Mm-hmm.
did it in 2 years. I
Hmm.
got there with a private license, and I left there with just all my instrument, my instructor ratings, commercial, multi, glider rating, helicopter rating, seaplane rating. I did a lot of flying. I had a
Hmm.
lot of instructors,
Wow.
and and the benefit of doing it so quickly was I was virtually 2 years ahead of all my contemporaries
Wow.
when I started to apply to the airlines. And if you know anything about the airline business, seniority is everything. So
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky to get hired at Piedmont at a very young age. I had just turned after my 23rd birthday. So I was almost 23 and a half. So very young. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been there now over 36 and a half years.
Wow, 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 wow. Um, are there any particular flying lessons that you had that stick out in your mind? Any lessons that you learned that was kind of a seminal moment for you?
Oh, well, I learned this, and as much as I enjoy going to air shows with George and watching air shows, I learned very early on taking an aerodynamics, kind of a acrobat, where they teach you the aerobatics. I do not like anything going upside down, loops. George would be thinking he was really treating me. I'd come to an air show, oh, I've got you a ride in a T6, or I've got you a ride doing this. And I finally had to say, I do not care for that any more than about 15 degrees turn of a bank. I spill my passengers coffee, and that's not comfortable for me. So
Right.
I learned early on, I'm doing exactly what I should be doing, which is nice, smooth, straight and level flying. I enjoy watching it, but I do not like doing it.
What made you decide to become an airline pilot, Lori?
Well, I think just starting young, I think for so many women, particularly since we're still only about 5% of the total airline pilot population, unless you're exposed to it, it just doesn't appeal to you or come to you that might be a profession that you want to go in. And since I started so young and I just kept doing it, eventually it just became an obvious choice.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I wasn't a trailblazer, I wasn't among the first. I was the 16th woman that Piedmont Airlines hired. And back in the day, really, my biggest challenge was flying with a lot of men who had never flown with a woman before. They kind of didn't quite know how to take us. In fact, one of the very first pilots I flew with, I stuck my hand out to say, oh, I'm Lori. I'm going to be your flight engineer today, because we were flying the 727 back then. And he just looked at my hand and he said, another woman in my cockpit.
Oh, my.
And then I had to fly 4 days with that guy. And, at the end of those 4 days, he was like my best friend. I think he wanted to dislike me because I was a woman. But when he saw that I was capable and congenial and a nice person, he kind of took that back quickly and really took me under his wing and was a great guy after that. But initially, they just didn't know quite how to take us.
Okay. Do you have any humorous or memorable stories that you can share?
Oh my goodness. I don't know where I'd stop with that. At Atlantis, actually, we were flying one day. I was co-pilot on the Navajo, and we were flying from Charlotte to Augusta. And in flight, the aft door opened in flight. And as you can imagine, the top is just kind of banging in the wind, and the stairs had unfolded. And my captain looks at me and he says, go back there and take care of it. And, when you're young and dumb, you don't know any different. And I went back there and I leaned out, as instinct would tell you to do, to try and grab the top of the hatch. Well, the wind just about sucked me out of it. My tie came off, my sunglasses came off. And if not for the passenger sitting in the very last seat that held me and kept me from being sucked out of the airplane, I kind of knelt down. I could see the stairs were almost like pulling away from the aircraft. And I was afraid if they came off, they might hit the tail. And so I was holding firm to those so that they wouldn't. And of course, my captain's trying to lean back and look to see me, but he doesn't. And he's convinced that I have been sucked out of the airplane. And so he did a mayday, mayday, mayday. My first officer's been sucked out of the aircraft.
Oh my goodness.
Lo and behold, of course, we managed to land. They directed us to an emergency landing in Saluda, South Carolina, on a drag strip of all things. And
oh my goodness.
I don't know who was more excited, me to see the ground or him to see that I had not met my fate there in the sky. And I mention that story because years later, when I did go for my interview at Piedmont Airlines, they looked at my name. That story had kind of made
the rounds.
The rounds at the industry, and they looked at my name and they looked at Atlantis Airlines and they said, "Hey, aren't you that girl that almost got sucked out of the airplane?
Oh
So
my goodness.
it kind of followed me, and was an excellent experience, because my interview was practically over. After that point, they said, well, if you could handle that, I think you can handle anything that we might have for you here. And so that kind of was my interview at Atlantis, or at Piedmont Airlines.
Oh wow. Now, what's your favorite aircraft fly?
Without a doubt, the Boeing 727. What a Cadillac. I fly the Airbus now, and I love the Airbus, because I used to say, if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. But I've been on Airbuses now for over 20 years. But the Boeing 727 was an absolute Cadillac to fly, and I would give anything to get to fly it again.
Now, you can see the pictures I'm showing here, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're going to go to some of your newer shots here. Tell us about this here.
Oh, well, those are my brothers. We just enjoyed our 35-year anniversary from our being hired at Piedmont. And those of us that gathered to celebrate, we tried to stand in the same position that we were in our new hire picture. And there's only 5 of us still flying. A few years yet to go.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And there's you in the simulator, I believe.
Yeah, I was a check airman on the Airbus for about 18 years. And that flight right there is kind of funny. I often got to fly with just women. And on this occasion, I was training those 2 gals. And one of the other instructors had fun with our fleet captain. He went into his office and he says, John, you ought to check out Sim Bay number 2. It's up there flying completely unmanned.
Nice.
And he leapt from his desk and he ran out there, and they all had a good hoot over that, because he says, I thought, who's in there? And well, it's unmanned. Well, who's in there? No, but it's unmanned. It's all women. And they had me open the door, and I waved, and they got him good. They thought that was pretty funny.
Nice.
Totally unmanned flight.
Now, you're a bit of a celebrity as well, because you starred in the movie Sully.
Oh, well, I didn't star in it, but I certainly had a cameo, if you will. I was, obviously, having been a check airman all those years, when they wanted to film Sully, Warner Brothers wanted to use actors, and they came to the company and they said, here, we appreciate you letting us use your simulators. Mm-hmm. We'd like to bring actors in. And the company said, whoa, not so fast. We only allow our pilots to fly our simulators. But since you only want to film in a day, why don't you consider using some of our check airmen? They're in the simulator every day. They probably do whatever you want in one take. Mm-hmm. And so Warner Brothers said, okay, send us the headshot of about 10 of your people. And Mr. Eastwood picked, and I was one of the ones selected. And oddly enough, I was the NTSB investigator for the company for 1549. And when we went to shoot our scene, of course, Mr. Eastwood was right behind right behind us there in the simulator for 7 hours. Wow. As we filmed. 7 hours for what it ended up being a minute and a half on the screen. I guess that's how it works, right, in Hollywood. The co-pilot said, now, Mr. Eastwood, are you aware that Lori was the NTSB investigator for this accident? And he yelled, cut! And he leaned in, he says, are we doing everything exactly the way you did it with the NTSB? And I had to say, at the risk of maybe losing my own scenes, because my scenes in the movie were to go and land and crash over in Teterboro. And with our investigation, we never did that, because Airbus had already proven that it could be done. So we spent all our time trying to go back and return to the runways there in LaGuardia. And so I figured I had just ensured that all my scenes were going to end up on the cutting room floor. But in fact, they did not. And he really wanted those scenes to live. And so that's how I got to have my minute and a half of silver screen time, if you will.
Wow. Have you been back to that airplane since the accident?
I have seen it. I've taken my grandchildren. I'm a Girl Scout leader. We've taken them over there to the Carolina Aviation Museum before it closed.
Right.
And been very proud to show that airplane off. Absolutely.
When I was volunteering, when I was a docent over there, when they had a volunteer appreciation dinner, they opened up the airplane and
Oh,
and
how fun.
let us sit in it, and I got to sit in the first officer seat and the captain seat. It was really neat, and
That is very cool.
so I
I
was.
understand it's experiencing a little bit of decay, if you
Hmm.
will, having spent a lot of time underwater.
Right.
Uh, so
Hmm. Yeah, and it is hangared in the old Southern Aeromotive hangar over there, and the other airplanes they're outside, and you can see them if you drive by.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, let's see here. Now we have some other pictures of some activities that you did out on the ramp
Yeah,
recently.
as a chief, you get to be involved in so many incredible things, and you try and take on things that will help the flight department. And those pictures of me on the ramp there,
Hmm.
I did a day in the life of a ramper, just trying to understand exactly some of the interface that we have with our ramp folks. And, we're always trying to make sure that have an on time operation. And they let me, I loaded that airplane right there all by myself, loaded an entire aircraft, toting bags and driving the tug and being the wing walker and all those things. But in the process, really got to take some quality, spend some quality time with the folks there and understand what some of the issues are between us and flight. It was very rewarding. That picture there with the first officer is what it typically looks like now to take, do our recurrent training in the
Hmm.
simulator with our masks on.
Hmm.
And you don't even really notice that they're on. We're pretty used to it by now.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that gentleman right there, Captain Carl Gamble, retired, might be known to a lot of folks, famous to us. He was the only captain at Piedmont Airlines ever to be hijacked
Hmm.
back in 1984 on a flight to Miami. They hijacked him to Cuba.
Wow.
He tells his tale. He was a very decorated, distinguished Flying Cross uh, recipient for the Vietnam War.
Hmm.
So we're proud of him. He just recently came and spoke to a group of us pilots at American.
Neat. Let's see here. No, we have some pictures of you with some family members.
Yeah, that's my granddaughter. We just recently did an event up at Lake Norman Air Park
Hmm.
for the women in aviation, and she came with me, and that's what she was wearing. And that's my grandson on his 13th birthday. He just took his very first flight lesson.
Wow.
I started when I was 13, and so I made sure on his birthday he got to take his first lesson.
That's
And
neat.
as you can see, I try and immerse them as best I can with aviation between George and I.
Hmm.
There's always something flight related to get to go and do, and I'm hoping they catch the bug and will enjoy it as much as George and I have.
Yeah, I hope the same thing for my daughter. She
Yeah.
enjoys being out in the airplanes, and I took her out the other day and to a local flight school, and I explained that I had done some flying out there and took my ground school at the flight school, and I said, "Can you show us one of the airplanes?" And the flight instructor was nice enough to give me a set of keys and let me walk out there and put my daughter
Wow.
in the airplane, and he just asked me not to crank it up. And I said I can do that, and my daughter crawled in and told me to get in the left seat and shut the door. I said, okay. I said, what do you want to do now? She said, I'm ready, Dad. Take me flying.
Oh, see, she's all ready to go.
Yeah, and I had to figure out some way to explain to her why I couldn't take her because I wasn't current, and she she was kind of a little puzzled, and I said, "Well, Hannah, I can't take you because I didn't bring the headsets."
Oh.
And she said, "Oh, Dad, how could you? You forgot the headsets." But we're gonna
Oh,
wait till she's a little older before before we take her for a ride so that she can
yeah.
remember it.
She's gonna love it.
Yep. Now, you have a certain fondness for an air traffic controller. Can you the story of how you met your husband, George?
Well, yep, I was based in Greensboro and he was a controller there, and you know how those things happen, pilots and controllers. We just seem to meet up, and we've been married for 25 years now, and
Wow.
he had retired from the Greensboro Tower there after 38 years and then started his own Air Boss business. And before grandchildren, I would attend a lot of shows with him, and
Hmm.
he did an awful lot of events, and I'd go along, and we had a lot of fun. And I think you probably have some pictures showing some of that, uh, those good times,
Yep,
which is when you and I met.
sure. There's you in the wall of fire.
Well, I tell you, that was a fun day. I was invited to go out to the pyro field and help them do all the dirty work for Tora Tora.
Hmm.
And it's all day of setting up bombs, and the reward is getting to blast them all off during the act. And a lot of fun. It's very addicting. Um, those were signs we would hold up when the number 7 would go by on the blues as they would taxi out. And we would show our appreciation for what they were about to go do, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we had fun at that show in Lynchburg. That was a really
Yeah, it
special
was a very good.
time.
Yes, it was very
Yeah.
well attended.
Yep. Let's see.
Everybody likes to watch the blues.
Sure. Yeah, I honestly think they're a little better than the Thunderbirds. They're a
Well, they
little,
would probably take exception with that,
yeah, but
but they're
I'm a
both,
big fan of the Thunderbirds too. So
yeah,
no
two
disrespect to the
great
Air
teams.
Force.
Yes, sir, two great teams. They do a lot to recruit our nation's pilots,
Certainly.
and what a spectacular job they do.
Yeah, and they're, from Blue Angel or Thunderbird number one down to the last person on the ground crew. They are the cream of the crop, and
Yes, they
they're
are.
the public relations specialist of the Air Force, and you couldn't ask for a better representation for our Air Force and our Navy than
Hmm.
the Blue Angels and the
Yeah,
Thunderbirds. I
yeah.
have a friend.
There's the boss right. There's the
Yep.
boss right there.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who happened to be staying in the air show hotel, and she got to ride the elevator with some of the Blue Angels, and she said, "This is the best elevator ride I've ever been on,"
Ah,
and the boss said, "Ours too." So
oh,
that really made her day. Um, Let me get back to my questions here. What makes a successful airline pilot, Lori?
well, I think we all have something, quite a few things in common. We're A-type personalities, right? We're very reliable, punctual, a little overbearing, probably. My husband would say. We have great leadership skills, I think, professional. If you ask a lot of pilots, you'll find that there's a vast majority that are firstborn, left-handed, and for females, a lot of redheads. I'm not a
Mm,
redhead, but those three characteristics seem to come to mind. But
mm,
all in all, very much, George was calling me a mother hen. I'm always looking out for people, compassionate, um, but very fastidious and very decisive when I need to be. And I think all pilots kind of share those same traits.
mm. I'm going to ask you two questions, and they're a little similar, but kind of different. What advice would you give now to a young Lori Klein? What would you tell her?
Well, I think that there's no question that because we are such a minority, we're always going to be looked at differently. We're going to kind of stick out, and they're going to see you, and we just got to make sure that when they see a woman pilot, whether it's a young Lori Klein or another young pilot that might be listening, you just have to make sure that what they see is absolutely the most professional pilot. They don't see a woman, they don't see a man, they just see a professional pilot doing their job. And sometimes it means um, working harder. I will definitely say, as a woman, I feel like I have worked twice as hard to gain the same respect. and that's okay. It's made me a great pilot. It's made me what I am, and I think it takes a lot of discipline, and I think anybody can do it. You just have to understand that's one thing. Just remain professional throughout, and you'll be accepted and you'll be respected for what you do.
Well, I think that kind of answers both of those questions I was going to ask. Thanks for that. What accomplishment are you proudest of in your life, Lori?
I think if you're going to be an airline pilot, the task of trying to juggle to get the most out of the job and the most out of family, it's very difficult. You're gone a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes extra time. I might not have quantity of time with my family, but I have quality time when I am with them. And so just successfully juggling family and career, if you're going to be an airline pilot, especially a woman, because the female is usually the homemaker at home. They're the one making Christmas happen and making birthdays happen. And if you're going to do all that and be successful in the flight deck as well, it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of planning, a lot of organization. And I pride myself, I think, in having done both well.
Well, great. Well, Lori, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk with me and for, hanging with me while we worked on some technical difficulties and tried things a little different. Several years ago when we did an air show in Winston-Salem, you and George invited me over with about 30 of your closest friends to do a perform or to participate in a performers party for the air show, and you and I sat for probably half an hour and talked, and just have always been very impressed with you. You've become a good friend, and appreciate what you've done for the airline industry and for women in the airline industry, and for what you've done for Piedmont and American Airlines, and just your passion for aviation and passing that on to the next generation.
Well, thank you. And we feel the same about you, because you certainly have a passion for this. You've studied and overcome so many obstacles to do what you do and bring such color and commentary to not only air shows, but this venue with new podcasts.
Appreciate that. So, folks, we're going to wrap it up today, and we thank you for joining us for another edition of Faith, Friends, Flying, and Freedom with Captain Lori Cline, one of the chief pilots for American Airlines. And so, as a friend of mine used to say, down with the flaps, down with the gear, 3-point landing, and we're out of here. Blue skies, everybody.
So long.